In the frozen heart of North America, where ancient forests whisper secrets to the wind, there exists a legend so chilling it has haunted generations. This is not just a monster tale, it's a warning, a story of hunger, madness, and the thin line between man and beast. Today, we uncover the true story of the Wendigo. But first, what is the Wendigo? To many indigenous peoples of the Algonquin-speaking tribes, the Wendigo is more than myth. It's a spiritual corruption, a curse that befalls those who turn to cannibalism in times of desperation, a creature of ice and hunger, born from human sin. Yet over time, this sacred belief has been twisted, sensationalized, and turned into pop culture horror. So let's journey back, before movies, before campfire tales, to the roots of the Wendigo. Long before European settlers arrived, indigenous nations across the Great Lakes, Canadian Shield, and Northern Plains spoke of the Wendigo, a being of insatiable greed and starvation. Among the Ojibwe, Cree, and Algonquin, the Wendigo was feared not as a physical beast, but as a malevolent spirit that could possess humans. When famine struck, when winter froze the land and food ran out, some people resorted to the unthinkable, eating human flesh. This act wasn't just survival, it was a spiritual transgression. To consume another person was to invite the Wendigo into your soul. Once possessed, the victim would transform. Their eyes turned yellow, skin stretched tight over bones, lips peeled back to reveal jagged teeth, and an eternal hunger gnawed at them, no matter how much they ate. The Wendigo became a metaphor for excess, greed, and isolation. In a world where community meant survival, turning on your own was the ultimate betrayal. One of the earliest recorded accounts comes from the Jesuit relations in the 1600s. Missionaries documented indigenous warnings about the Wendigo, describing it as a giant, emaciated figure with antlers, breath like decay, and a voice that echoed through blizzards. But these weren't just stories, they were teachings. Elders used the Wendigo to instill values, share food, care for the weak, and never lose your humanity in the cold. The myth and history blur when we look at real events. One of the most infamous cases is the case of Swift Runner, a Cree trapper from Alberta. In the winter of 1878 to 1879, Swift Runner led his family into the wilderness. When spring came, he returned alone, claiming his family had died of starvation. But authorities found something horrifying: the bodies of his wife, mother, and 6 children, all shot, stripped, and partially eaten. Swift Runner confessed. He said he was haunted by a Wendigo spirit. He claimed the creature made him do it, that he was no longer in control. Yet the court saw it differently. He was hanged in 1879, one of the last public executions in Canada. Was he mad, possessed, or just a monster? Indigenous communities understood this was a Wendigo walking among them. Another case, the St. James Asylum in 1907. A Cree man named Jack Fiddler was arrested for killing a woman he claimed was turning into a Wendigo. Fiddler and his brother had spent decades hunting what they called Wendigo-sick individuals, people believed to be possessed before they killed others. To them, killing a Wendigo was an act of mercy, but Canadian law saw it as murder. Fiddler died in custody before trial, his worldview dismissed as superstition. These stories reveal a painful truth. Colonization disrupted traditional ways of life, leading to famine, trauma, and breakdowns in community. Conditions right for Wendigo psychosis, a cultural-bound syndrome recognized by anthropologists. By the 20th century, the Wendigo had escaped its indigenous roots and entered mainstream horror. Stephen King's Pet Sematary, Algernon Blackwood's short story, The Wendigo, and even Marvel Comics transformed the creature into a flesh-eating ghoul. Hollywood stripped away the spiritual weight and replaced it with jump scares. The Wendigo became a monster lurking in the woods, a far cry from its origins as a moral lesson about greed and isolation. But something powerful happened. The legend evolved. Now, the Wendigo symbolizes more than cannibalism. It represents environmental destruction, consuming nature until nothing is left. It mirrors addiction, the endless hunger that devours everything in its path. And in a digital age, it's become a metaphor for our own insatiable appetites, for attention, for power, for consumption. Psychiatrists in the 1800s tried to classify Wendigo psychosis as a mental disorder, but they missed the point. It wasn't madness. It was a cultural response to extreme trauma. When your world is collapsing, sometimes the only explanation is a supernatural force pulling you toward darkness. Let's get scientific for a moment. Could a creature like the Wendigo exist? Biologically, extreme starvation can cause hallucinations, paranoia, and violent behavior. In cold climates, the body burns calories rapidly. Without food, the mind breaks. Cases of starvation cannibalism have occurred throughout history, from the Donner Party to famine-stricken regions. But the Wendigo isn't just about hunger. It's about choice. Choosing to eat human flesh when other options exist. That's where the evil lies. Some cryptozoologists suggest the Wendigo could be a surviving prehistoric predator or an undiscovered species. Others point to strange sounds in the northern woods, whispers on the wind, trees snapping without wind, footprints that vanish. Whether real or imagined, the Wendigo endures because it speaks to our deepest fears, that we too could become monsters under the right pressure. So what is the true story of the Wendigo? It's a story of survival, of morality, of the thin line between humanity and savagery. To the indigenous peoples who kept this legend alive, the Wendigo is not just a monster, it's a mirror. It reflects what happens when we forget our connection to each other, to the land, and to the spirits that guide us. In a world facing climate crisis, social division, and unchecked consumption, maybe the Wendigo is more relevant than ever. Next time you're alone in the woods, listen closely, not for claws or howls, but for the quiet voice inside that asks, how much is enough? If you enjoyed this deep dive, smash that like button, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss a chilling tale. And remember, in the cold, don't lose your way or your soul.